You're looking at very dramatic history being made as millions of gallons of water from the Chicago River erupt into the nearly century-old freight tunnel network 40 feet below ground, crippling Chicago's loop and triggering an exhaustive effort to stop the leak. Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Kim.
And I'm John Hogan. Welcome to this special edition of What's in View. The crisis, declared a national emergency by the White House, began Monday, April 13th, when the tunnel rupture at Kinsey Street sent floodwaters gushing into Loop buildings. The flood threatened retailers, county buildings, and electrical basement vaults of some of Chicago's most well-known institutions, and sent hundreds of thousands of Loop workers into the streets.
When they arrived home after an abbreviated workday, they joined thousands of others glued to their television sets, watching the events as they escalated.
We want to make sure you didn't miss the outstanding teamwork Edison employees demonstrated around the clock and from across the system to protect the public safety and quickly restore power. What's in View now brings you some of the highlights of our efforts.
This is a special report from Channel 2 News.
Now, a construction accident is sending the water from the Chicago River rushing through an old tunnel system into several buildings, including, as we just said, City Hall, Marshall Fields, the Merchandise Mart, the Sears Building, and the Board of Trade. We are also being told just now that they're trying to close the hole with some steel plate and some rocks. They're trying to obviously lower those down. It's very dangerous at this point.
If you look past me, down the river.
We have a bulletin to report that we will be shutting off power in the downtown Loop area from Washington to Adams Street, Dearborn to Michigan. They're afraid that this water is going to flood the power supplies and do major damage to live electrical wires.
When we arrived here this morning, it was dry. The level below that level was already flooded, a couple of feet off that. As you can see right now, it's already about 15 feet on that level that was right this morning, and water just keep pouring in, and we'll see if we can hold the level down with all these pumps.
This is a very serious problem, and we're going to stop the water from leaking. We will assess who is responsible at this time. We cannot give any answers who's responsible.
We've asked the people in the commercial type structures from, as I told you before, from Chicago River on the north, the Taylor Street on the south, from Michigan Avenue to Canal, to evacuate their buildings, to avoid anybody being stuck in elevators, okay?
Since the mid-afternoon, we have been successful in restoring electric service to approximately 20 separate buildings scattered throughout the Loop area. The work will go on as necessary around the clock until every customer is restored, however long that takes.
We have been working with AT&T. We have, as you know, the 1-800 Edison 1 number, but we are going to, during the period of this restoration, create 3 special 800 numbers. We should have that back, or have that up and running, certainly by 6 tomorrow morning. This will add 72 special lines that for customers specifically affected by the outages in the Loop.
Our top story this morning, big problems at the Merchandise Mart and Marshall Fields on State Street. Their basements are flooded with water that's rising higher by the minute.
At the height of the problems yesterday, there were about 200 buildings in the Loop without electrical power. About 80 of those buildings have now had power restored.
A Monday night that we knew the problem was pretty widespread and that we were going to have to assemble 4 different restoration teams. So we met at Chicago North Monday night, About 7:30, we assembled 4 different teams. The response was just like we always have for any trouble.
Very early Monday morning, we were informed that the tunnel had been breached by the corporate offices, and we immediately notified all of our call centers throughout the system to be prepared to take an influx of calls from customers that may need assistance as a result of power outages. On our regular Edison 1 number, we're seeing between 4,000 and 5,000 more calls, and on the 3 800 numbers that are dedicated just for the flood disaster, we've received about 1,500 calls.
Our sales group has been involved in putting together a list of customers that are fed off all the different network feeders, all the network centers, contacting those customers, telling them when the outages were going to begin, when the outages were going to end. I've been working around the clock developing those lists and contacting those customers and trying to make sure that our customers get the best service they can under these conditions.
The crisis atmosphere at City Hall seems to be deepening this morning, and so is the water in the City Hall basement.
Now, they are pumping out of this one hole next to the City Hall and County Building 750,000 gallons of water an hour. And what's amazing is the water is still going up. One workman there told me it's going up about an inch an hour.
You were talking about putting either cement down in or sandbags or inflatable rubber bladders. Has a decision been made on what you'll seal with?
We're keeping our options open for everything, and we'll throw anything down there we can to seal it off.
Way down there in a tunnel used by ComEd, these men are trying to work an engineering wonder. They're drilling holes from this tunnel into a drop shaft that leads to the deep tunnel another 140 feet down. Eventually, they hope to lead the floodwater to the drop shaft and let gravity drain it all off.
Well, Bill, the good news is that indeed we did restore approximately 40 buildings north of Washington this morning, and we expect to restore the buildings south of Washington, approximately 37 of them, by tomorrow morning. Now, most of the buildings that are connected to the freight tunnel are located in that area, and so there's about 25 buildings that are flooded, that have wet switchgear, that we simply will not be able to restore. We're cutting them loose from the network.
A diver went down into the hole in the ground there to inspect conditions in the basement of this building. And when he emerged, he told us that there was 2,000 gallons of water per minute flowing into the basement through conduit, and he's trying to fix that.
We've had divers, our divers in there, we've had our pumps in there, and we're going to continue to try to stabilize that situation in the basement. One of our concerns is that we do not wish to bring the water levels too low to create a pressure system that might blow out the bulkhead that is in that basement, which is roughly half the size of a football field.
Okay, we're down here basically to assist the Chicago Board of Trade in maintaining the integrity of their communications system so that they can continue trading. What we're doing right now with the divers is we're going in to check the integrity of our bulkhead. In our cable vault, we have a bulkhead directly into the freight tunnel. There was a little bit of seepage that came through that, so we're concerned about the integrity.
Clearly, there is no quick fix to the Great Loop underground flood. There is only the relentless and increasingly successful efforts of Commonwealth Edison to restore electricity to scores of loop buildings.
We activated the entire system, 20,000 employees for all practical purposes. We went on emergency restoration. So we're able to bring in crews from different areas to give other crews a rest. Manpower and equipment is not our problem.
Top story at 6 o'clock. The eyes of thousands of people are focusing tonight on a tiny space where a group of brave men are risking their lives to help get the heart of the city beating again.
The diver will then take the bladder down into the tunnel where he'll position it, stand by while it's inflated, and then make sure there's a tight seal.
Commonwealth Edison is getting ready for drier days ahead. Workers at the Maywood facility are preparing equipment to replace the flooded transformers throughout the downtown area. The new vaults will be installed as soon as water is drained from the underground tunnel.
Some important news about tomorrow. Some buildings that did have power today won't have it tomorrow. ComEd is going to start a series of selected blackouts. Certain buildings will be taken out of the power grid. That will start tonight.
At that very moment, 7 skyscrapers in the northeast corner of the loop went completely dark.
It makes me feel quite funny. Our first obligation has always been, it's ingrained in us, is to keep electricity flowing at all costs almost. And to have to intentionally disconnect service is a very tough decision, and it was not made lightly.
Basically what we'd be doing is chopping off the bad vaults. It's a network, what they call grid. It's because it goes, it almost looks like a grid of paper. So these feeders go to many different locations. So basically all we're doing is physically removing the bad ones and then relivening all the good ones back up.
We take utilities like electricity for granted in modern life, but I'm telling you, I have a new appreciation for what goes on beneath these streets, what these Commonwealth Edison crews go through after this crisis.
I'm tired. Everybody around here is tired and beat. Right. Your crews really have done a remarkable job.
They have. We're very proud of our people. They've been on the street for long hours in difficult conditions, working, but they do come through.
You're looking at a live picture near Union Station. It's 5 days and counting in the Loop flood disaster.
They are vacuuming out the debris from the tunnel that is closest to us in preparation for dumping down concrete, fast-drying concrete, and sandbags in an effort to continue to plug this leak.
It's believed that east side of the tunnel is now mostly sealed off. But because the tunnel Y is on the other side of the bridge, that same operation will have to be completed on both sections of the Y fork. That means 4 more shafts.
ComEd announced today that starting tonight there will be 2 preventative blackouts, power being cut off in large sections of the loop. In Sector A, you see here starting tonight at 8 o'clock, bounded on the north by Adams, east by Michigan, Dearborn to the west, and Congress to the south, some 57 buildings will lose electrical power at 8 o'clock for, ComEd estimates, 12 to 15 hours.
What we're doing tonight is part of the dropping of the network feeders for clearing some of the network vaults that are still alive and underwater in the downtown area due to the freight tunnel flood. The underground crews are disconnecting the vaults that are flooded and are alive, and they're going to disconnect them so they can cut them off from the grid.
We're dropping off network center that goes into DePaul because it's underwater. The transformer's underwater, so we're eliminating that transformer so we can liven up the line.
All of these buildings are being shut down because the underground transformers that provide electricity for them are underwater, are in the floodwater. They've been operating, but in order to prevent, in the next days or weeks ahead, a power failure in which elevators would fail and people might get hurt, ComEd is shutting them down now, going to plug them in to other transformer sources so that in the days during recovery, at least power can be assured to these buildings.
You're looking live at work crews on the verge of plugging the last 2 tunnel branches on the west bank of the Chicago River. They say the pouring of concrete may be complete by tonight.
The bulkhead question, we would prefer not to ever open again, frankly, until those bulkheads are sealed up.
You mean when I talk with that question about the intersection of the tunnels and the Chicago River, you really want those sealed up before you go back into business?
I think we would prefer them sealed up before we go back into business for a lot of reasons.
Mr. Pectus, you keep hearing this talk about should we close this tunnel, and that concerns you, does it not?
Yes, Chitra. The tunnel is our superhighway for delivering electricity to the loop. It's very, very important to us. If we didn't have a deep tunnel, we'd have to build one, or our other alternative would be to put in either 4 to 14 miles, our engineers say, of new lines in the city streets. We'd have to do deep cuts on Michigan Avenue, State Street. We'd create a havoc. We need those deep tunnels.
Commonwealth Edison now tells us the power to the buildings that are behind me here in a small area of the loop, 19 of the buildings, will be back on by 6 o'clock tonight. That's an hour earlier than expected.
Okay.
At 7 a.m. we opened up group 1500, which has about 12 kV feeders in it. Because he's underwater, there's no way to get to the access to the 12 kV service. So we have to cut it off outside, isolate it from the low voltage network grid, and then restore the service.
ComEd workers locate cables supplying each building. Some buildings have transformers underwater but are still being supplied power. That power is then shut off. To assist the workers is a device called a rover.
We're here today with our underwater mini submarine. It's a Mini Rover Mark I, which we normally use for our reactor vessel exams, visual examinations, search and retrieval, and we've put it down in this freightway tunnel. And we're down about 100 feet now, and we're just trying to help support these people with giving them the third eye.
What the public is seeing now is something that goes on 365 days a year. Andy, these folks that you see down in these grungy manholes didn't materialize overnight. This is their daily work. It's just now that they're getting some of the credit that they're due because of this catastrophic situation.
We have had our people working around the clock since Monday. And they what they are doing, particularly in the underground area, is almost a surgical procedure in order to isolate the good parts of the system from the bad. They have done this and met the estimated times for these cuts in every single case.
Can you talk a little bit about the cost that ComEd is incurring, and what can ratepayers expect in terms of maybe requests down the road to recoup some of these losses in terms of rate hikes?
Well, Jim, in any given year, we expect several emergencies, whether it's a tornado or an ice storm. So we have budgeted for the unexpected. And the costs that we are seeing with this really fall into that budget, and there really isn't any way to recoup those costs. It's something that our ratepayers, the people who receive the bills, will not see a rate increase because of this.
Commonwealth Edison is opening an emergency office at 111 South Wabash. 11 Loop buildings remain without electricity.
We're opening the center up so that we have services available to any affected customers right at the location that they're affected. Basically, we're a block or two from any customer that might have been affected by the flood. This way they can come right in. It's going to be a 24-hour center and get attention right when they need it.
I think we performed magnificently. I think you'll note that the press has been very, very positive as regards Commonwealth Edison's efforts. We've gotten magnificent cooperation from the city and other elements that have been involved in this restoration. This has been top-notch. I couldn't put it any better.
Our benefit is not going to be rest, but I think satisfaction for a job well done.
That was incredible video. John, I don't think we'd find anyone who would disagree that Edison was really there when its customers needed help. Talk about meeting the company's vision.
It was one of the greatest efforts I've ever seen, perhaps the greatest in my years with the company.
Tops them all.
Oh, the Edison team has risen to the occasion so many times, but I think that our customers would agree that this was maybe our greatest effort ever.
Most definitely. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this special edition devoted to the Great Flood. Thank you for spending some of your time with us. On behalf of John and me and the Watson View crew, we look forward to seeing you again next month. So long, everyone.
So long.